Hello and welcome. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran and you're watching News Night on DD India, your prime-time destination for news and bespoke analysis. It's good to have you again with us. All right, on the show tonight, with 1 day to go for the US election, Trump on Sunday launched his final two-day sprint of campaigning across the battleground states in a dramatic bid to defy the polls and win a come-from-behind victory over Democrat Joe Biden. A record 90 million Americans have already voted early as Trump and his Democratic rival Joe Biden campaigned across the country to try to sway the few remaining undecided voters. Meanwhile, concerns about the coronavirus on polling day have also pushed up the numbers of people voting by mail or at early in-person polling sites. Also on the show, there's another big election due in Bihar on 3rd November. Campaigning for phase 2 of Bihar election ended on Sunday. We get you a roundup of the day's developments in the state, plus news and updates from around the world. All that and much more coming up over the next 1 hour. But first, as always, the headlines. Campaigning ends for 94 seats in Bihar. Second phase of polling on 3rd November in 17 districts of the state. A total of 1,463 candidates are in the fray. Prime Minister Narendra Modi campaigns for the third phase of Bihar election, holds poll rallies at Baga, Samastipur, Motihari and Chhapra, slams the Mahagathbandhan on dynastic politics, says double Yuvrajas are only worried about saving their throne. The RJD-led Mahagathbandhan also campaigns with vigor. Campaigning ends for 28 assembly by-polls in Madhya Pradesh. Star campaigners put in their might. 22 women among 355 candidates in the fray. Polling on 3rd November. Results on 10th November. Good news on the economic front. In the time of COVID-19, over 1 lakh crore GST revenue collected in October. It is 10% higher than the GST revenue in the same month last year. A big win for security forces in Jammu and Kashmir. Hizbul Mujahideen's chief commander killed in an encounter in Srinagar. The joint operation by CRPF and Jammu and Kashmir police sees the arrest of one more terrorist from Rangrez area of Srinagar. India continues to achieve significant success in its fight against COVID-19. Case fatality rate falls below 1.5%. Globally, the number of infected persons crosses 4 crore 63 lakh with over 12 lakh deaths. The UK crosses the 10 lakh mark of confirmed cases. UK, Austria and Portugal announced new lockdown measures. And US election to be held on 3rd November. More than 90 million Americans have already voted in early polls. The coronavirus takes center stage in the campaigns of Trump and Biden. Hello and welcome. First up, the second phase of Bihar election will be held on 3rd November, campaigning for which ended on Sunday evening. Hectic campaigning was seen for the second and third phases of the election. Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed 4 rallies on the day, even as the leaders of opposition parties sought to shore up support for themselves.
Campaigning for the second phase of Bihar Assembly elections has ended. The leaders of all parties use their men and machinery to woo voters. In the second phase, elections will be held on November 3rd for 94 assembly seats in 17 districts of the state. A total of 1,463 candidates are in the fray. These include 1,316 male, 146 female and 1 third gender candidate. In this phase, 513 independents are trying their luck. After the demise of stalwart leader Ram Vilas Paswan, his son Chirag Paswan, who is heading the party, LJP, is contesting Bihar Assembly election alone. This time LJP has fielded candidates only against incumbent JDU and not against BJP, as party vows to defeat JDU leader Nitish Kumar. LJP's two sitting legislators are contesting from Govindganj and Lalganj. In the opposition Mahagathbandhan alliance, RJD has fielded candidates for 56 seats for the second phase, in which it won 31 seats in the last assembly polls. The fate of Tej Pratap and Tejashwi Yadav, who is CM candidate from Grand Alliance, will be decided in this phase. Tejashwi Yadav is fighting the assembly polls from Raghopur, while his elder brother is contesting from Hasanpur. Several Congress veterans are trying their luck in this phase. Congress has fielded candidates in 24 seats. Newsnight Desk, DD India.
Meanwhile, in Madhya Pradesh, campaigning for assembly by-elections concluded on Sunday evening. The BJP and the Congress have pulled out all the stops in the last phase of the campaign. The by-elections will be held on 28 seats on 3rd November. 355 candidates are in the fray, which includes 333 men and 22 women. 27 seats out of 28 were won by the Congress in 2018, while in 2013, the Congress won on just 4 seats. All preparations underway for 3rd November by polls. Election Commission is leaving no stone unturned to ensure free and fair polls in the state, as well as ensuring safety in keeping with the COVID-19 protocol. Moving on, the economy of the country is coming back on track after the adverse impact of the corona crisis. Now, GST collection in October increased by 11% compared to last year. Other indicators also clearly point out a recovery in economic activities. A few days ago, PM Modi also reiterated India's potential to become a $5 trillion economy by 2024.
COVID-19 has adversely impacted the global economy. However, the pace at which economic activities have increased in India post-unlock clearly indicates that India's economy is coming back on track. Finance Ministry on Sunday said that gross GST revenue collection in the month of October reached 1,05,155 crore rupees. Not only that, GST collection has increased in most of the states. GST collection was crossing 1 lakh crore in February 2020 when coronavirus knocked at the door. But after that, economic activities got badly affected. As a result, GST revenue collection also decreased continuously. However, an increase in this revenue collection was noticed in September 2020 compared to the same month last year. And in October 2020, GST collection increased by 11% in comparison to the same period in 2019. As per the data provided by the Finance Ministry, 1,05,155 crore rupees of gross GST revenue has been collected in the month of October this year. Out of the gross GST revenue collected, CGST is 19,193 crore rupees. SGST is 25,411 crore rupees. IGST is 52,540 crore rupees and cess is 8,011 crore rupees. The total number of GSTR 3B returns filed for the month of October up to Saturday is 80 lakh. It is very good news for the central government because the centre has to borrow 1.1 lakh crore rupees on behalf of the states under a special window to meet the shortfall of goods and services tax compensation. The amount so borrowed will be passed on to the states as a back-to-back loan in lieu of GST compensation cess. As the first tranche of this compensation, the centre paid 6,000 crore rupees to 16 states and 2 union territories last month. Besides the increase in GST collection, other indicators also hint that Indian economy is on the trajectory of recovery. Positive output is noticed in the 8 most fundamental industrial sectors of the Indian economy. As a result, there is an increase in electricity demand, steel production, coal production and other sectors. Over 5% increase was noticed in the export of goods in September. A gauge of activity across India's manufacturing sector jumped to highest level in over 8 years in September as manufacturers saw a sharp pickup in new orders. Purchasing Managers Index PMI increased from 52.0 in August to 56.8 in September. 50% increase was also noticed in the services sector. There was also increase in demand in rural India in September 2020. As a result, 75% increase was recorded in the sale of tractors. Moreover, passenger vehicles in the country were also in steep demand and purchased at large scale. Few days ago, in an interview to a newspaper, Prime Minister Narendra Modi clearly said that the Indian economy is on the path of recovery, and he expressed confidence about its potential to become $5 trillion economy by 2024. Newsnight Desk, DD India.
All right, in news just coming in, India has firmly rejected attempts by Pakistan to bring material changes to a part of Indian territory under its illegal and forcible occupation. The MEA has reiterated that the Union territories of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh, including the area of so-called Gilgit-Baltistan, are an integral part of India by virtue of the legal, complete and irrevocable accession of Jammu and Kashmir to the Union of India in 1947. The government of Pakistan has no locus standi on territories illegally and forcibly occupied by it. Such attempts by Pakistan intended to camouflage its illegal occupation cannot hide the grave human rights violations, exploitation and denial of freedom for over 7 decades to the people residing in these Pakistan-occupied territories. Instead of seeking to alter the status of these Indian territories, India has called upon Pakistan to immediately vacate all areas under its illegal occupation, unquote. All right, my colleague Amritpal Singh now joins us for more on this story. Amritpal, if you can hear us, put this into context for our viewers, Amrit, and why has India said what it said?
Well, India believes that it is stated position of India, which in the MEA statement today has reiterated that the Jammu and Kashmir acceded to India in October 1947. The erstwhile Kingdom of Jammu and Kashmir had acceded to India and became a part of India, which includes Gilgit-Baltistan, which is under illegal occupation of Pakistan. Now, with Prime Minister Imran Khan going to Gilgit-Baltistan today and announcing a provisional provincial status, they're basically trying to alter the status and trying to make Gilgit-Baltistan a province of Pakistan, which is not acceptable to India, because India stated position is that Pakistan does not have any locus standi. These are territories which are illegally and forcibly occupied, and India has made its stand clear at various international fora. It has conveyed this to Pakistan also, and today also in its statement, the MEA says that instead of trying to alter the status of Indian territories, India calls upon Pakistan to immediately vacate these areas which are under the illegal occupation. So this is in response to Prime Minister Imran Khan's announcement today in Gilgit-Baltistan, saying that he was in Gilgit-Baltistan today, where he said that I've come to announce, the provisional provincial status. Interestingly, there are protests within Pakistan by people, by the Gilgitis, by the Baltis, by even the Kashmiris. If you remember, 2 days back, there was a massive demonstration in Muzaffarabad by the JKLF and the Student Liberation Front against, Pakistan government trying to alter the status of Gilgit-Baltistan. Ramesh?
Right, so as my colleague Amrit was pointing out in that conversation, India has issued a stern warning. India has firmly rejected attempts by Pakistan to bring material changes to the part of Indian territory under its illegal and forcible occupation. Now, the MEA statement put out, we just shared with you viewers, that Gilgit-Baltistan is an integral part of India by virtue of the legal, complete and irrevocable accession of Jammu and Kashmir into the Union of India in 1947. Right, Amrit, we leave it at that. Thank you for joining us on Newsnet with all that details. That was my colleague Amrit on the phone line from New Delhi. Right, moving on for now, a big win for the security forces in Jammu and Kashmir. Hizbul Mujahideen's chief commander was killed in an encounter. Kashmir's Inspector General of Police, Vijay Kumar, said it was a great achievement for the security forces.
को इतला मिली थी कल रात में इस घर में साउथ कश्मीर से एचएम का कमांडर डॉक्टर जिसको सिफोला बोलते हैं आया हुआ है। उसके बाद पुलिस सीआरपी आके कॉर्डन करते ही फायरिंग शुरू हो गया। बाद में आर्मी भी ज्वाइन कर ली। इनकाउंटर में एक टेररिस्ट मारा गया। हमारे सोर्स के हिसाब से ये लगभग 95% डॉक्टर सिफोला ही है। अभी बॉडी हम लोग बाहर निकाले हैं, उनके फैमिली को मिला के दिखा देंगे और आइडेंटिफाई हो जाएगा और बता देंगे आप लोग। आप ये मानिए कि एचएम का चीफ कमांडर है डॉक्टर रियाज नाकी के बाद, जो मरने के बाद जो रियाज नाकी जो मारा गया था मई में, उसके बाद ये पोस्ट लिया था एचएम चीफ का। ये पुलिस सिक्योरिटी फोर्सेस की बहुत बड़ी कामयाबी की बात है।
And now to your daily dose of US election 2020. All right, now to the cover story on News 9. The countdown has started for Tuesday's U.S. election amid a surge in the coronavirus cases across the country. Now, both President Donald Trump and Democratic nominee Joe Biden addressed multiple rallies in battleground states. More than 90 million Americans have already voted in early polls.
US President and Republican candidate Donald Trump on Sunday launched his final two-day sprint of campaigning across the battleground states of the 2020 election. As the coronavirus cases are surging in every competitive state before Election Day, Democrat nominee Joe Biden has launched sharpest attack on President Trump for failing America in controlling the deadly virus.
Will eradicate more quickly the virus, wipe out the China plague once and for all, and it's back to work, which is what we want. You know what we want? We want normal. We want normal. We want normal. Let's go back 7 months. Hello, how are you doing? Biden will delay the vaccine and impose a crushing lockdown on all Americans. You know he wants to lock it down. He has no idea they'll tell him what to do. He'll do whatever they ask.
I can tell you this. We wouldn't have 9 million confirmed cases of COVID in this nation, over 230,000 deaths. We wouldn't be seeing a new record of cases we're seeing right now. 90,000 cases today, yesterday. 90,000 new cases. We wouldn't be by the way, 500,000 in just the past week. This guy tells us it's going away. Only thing to make it go away if he goes away.
As reports suggest, in 13 states deemed competitive, the weekly average of new cases daily has jumped 45% over the past 2 weeks, from fewer than 23,000 on 16th October to nearly 33,000 on 30th October. Meanwhile, a record 90 million Americans have voted early in the US presidential election. Data on Saturday showed as President Donald Trump and his Democratic rival Joe Biden campaigned across the country to try to sway the few remaining undecided voters. The high number of early voters, about 65% of the total turnout in 2016, reflects intense interest in the contest. With 3 days of campaigning left, concerns about exposure to the coronavirus at the busy election day voting places on Tuesday have also pushed up the numbers of people voting by mail or at early in-person polling sites. Opinion polls show Trump trailing former Vice President Biden nationally, but with a closer contest in the most competitive states that will decide the election. Voters say the coronavirus is their top concern, with early voting across the United States expected to reduce queuing at the polls on Tuesday. In New York, anxious residents queued on Friday for a COVID test as cases in the city have risen again. Meanwhile, all three major US stock market indices are trading in the red, with Nasdaq declining 3% and the S&P 500 falling 2% on Friday. The Dow was the best performing index, though it too was down over 400 points. Election jitters are on the rise, with some investors starting to question how market-friendly a Joe Biden presidency would really be, as Biden still leads in ongoing pre-polls. Newsnight Desk, DD India.
All right, time now for our In Focus segment in which we are discussing about US election enters last lap. Joining me are two very special guests, Ambassador Neeraj Srivastav and Professor Harsh Pant. Gentlemen, welcome to News Night. If I can start with you, Professor Pant. Now, we are, 36 hours to go for the US elections on 3rd November. And opinion polls put Biden ahead of Trump slightly, some would say. So can Trump make a comeback? And if Trump loses, he'll be the first president since George H.W. Bush in '92 not to win a re-election.
These are extraordinary times for Americans and American elections and the electoral scene in America. And the way perhaps the campaigning is taking shape is a reflection of those times.
Right.
The key question, of course, for the Americans at the moment is how to deal with the coronavirus crisis, which seems to be galloping by the day. So, what we have seen now is our opinion polls, as you point out, showing nationally, of course, there is no doubt that Mr. Biden probably will get, like Hillary Clinton last time, larger percentage of national votes. But the question is what happens in the battleground states. And as you know, that's where the whole concentration of both candidates is. They are crisscrossing those states. They are trying to make a case about their, potency as candidates in those states. And those states, the numbers are still within margin of error in a lot of these states. So it's still a close call, and Mr. Trump may still surprise everyone like he did last time, and he continues to say that he has his share of shy voters who will come and dominate the cycle. So clearly, he aspires to build a momentum amongst his base, to rally around him, to come out in large numbers and vote for him. But as we also know, huge numbers are of early voting has taken place. And it's not entirely clear which way the early voters are going, because you can read it either way. It can be a democratic surge, but it can also be that there might be some concerns about Mr. Biden and his ability to govern, not from the center, but from the left. So for a lot of conservatives, that might be an issue. But clearly, the polls are suggesting a tightening up in battleground states, and it's there where Mr. Trump's future will be decided.
Indeed. Coming to you now, Ambassador Srivastav, opinion polls put Biden ahead of Trump, and Professor Pant says it's going to be a close call. But I know you have you are a skeptic when it comes to opinion polls because you read things differently. You've served in the US as well. What do you make of Trump and Biden's chances, and what are those key swing states that you would keep an eye out for?
Well, the key swing states are, what you call the Rust Belt states, Michigan, Wisconsin,
right,
Pennsylvania, then states like Ohio, Florida. These are the states which are very important. The question is that even last time, Hillary Clinton had a slight, was ahead in opinion polls.
Right.
But Trump managed to win narrowly in these states, what is called the battleground states, the 13 states which you mentioned. And the most important of the biggest of them, I have mentioned the most important of them. Now the question is that even last time Trump won by a slim majority.
Right.
He didn't win by a huge gap in these states. And Hillary Clinton had neglected these states during her campaigning.
Indeed.
She took it for granted that, traditionally some of these Rust Belt states, traditionally they have voted Democratic. So she probably took it for granted that they will vote Democratic. And she
in fact, Ambassador, Hillary Clinton did not campaign in Wisconsin at all in 2016.
No. So that's what I'm saying. So
Indeed.
She took it for granted. And what happened was that in all these important states, Trump flipped, but he flipped by a small majority. Now, this time, I have my doubts. The thing is that I think the pandemic of coronavirus it has already killed more than 230,000 Americans. The number of daily infections is, going up to almost 100,000. It has affected the lives of the Americans very deeply.
Right.
And I believe, I believe that Trump made a mistake by not imposing a lockdown early enough. He delayed imposition of a lockdown, which caused a lot of casualties. So this is the issue on which Biden is capitalizing.
Right.
Because actually, if you look at it, it is correct. All those countries which imposed an early lockdown were able to reduce the mortalities, including India, for example. So, anything can happen. But I think.
But Ambassador, at the same time, to speak in defense of Trump's position, he says, I imposed a flight ban on flights from Europe and other parts of the world, including China, and yet I was criticized by Biden for doing that.
No, it is true. If you look at the record of the statements made by Democratic leaders at that time, they were all saying that why are you imposing it? They were saying you should not impose a lockdown.
Right.
But who remembers this in politics? This is not what you remember.
Indeed.
You don't remember these things. Biden, in fact, is saying that it is Trump's fault that we have so many casualties.
So essentially, what you're saying, Ambassador, is that Trump seems to be losing the perception battle. Am I correct?
I think so. I think he's losing the perception battle.
Indeed. Professor Pant, let's talk a bit, if you will, about the early votes, the postal ballots and the in-person early polls. Now, reports suggest that 90 million Americans have already voted. Now, this number is almost 60% or 65% of the total turnout in 2016 election. Now, I want to ask you a simple question. Now, for a fact, it reflects the growing interest among the voters to go out there and actually vote either by post or by in-person early polls. But who does it stand to benefit, Trump or Biden?
See, essentially, at the moment, it seems that these early voters are largely Democratic voters, and there is whatever polling we have seen suggests that there is a degree of concern about post-November 3 scenario, where if the elections are quite tight, narrow, then there is a possibility of litigation happening, and perhaps that might create all sorts of issues for the larger democratic setup in the US. So I think there is a sense that perhaps Democratic voters are voting in huge numbers to prevent that thing from happening. But there is also something that the pollsters are now saying. They are saying that America is in for one of the largest turnouts ever seen in American history in recent memory. So clearly we are going to see some record numbers on the election day itself. And at the moment, we really don't know which way the wind is blowing, because on the Republican side, the assumption is that a lot of Trump supporters are going to come out on the election day. Because remember, Mr. Trump's supporters don't actually take corona very seriously. And on the other hand, a lot of the early voters are the voters that take this issue very seriously. So therefore, they are voting early in order to prevent from being there on the election day in a crowd or crowding out the polling booths. So in a sense, it's very, very interesting the way narratives are shaping up, because you have two sides, as Ambassador said. Both sides are shaping the narrative. One side is about health, public health. It's a public health crisis that Joe Biden says, and Mr. Trump has not done well. Mr. Trump is positioning himself as a candidate who is saying that, look, this is about economy. Health is, of course, important, but what you are going, if for example, if I impose the kind of lockdowns that you are witnessing, economic situation will be even dire. So clearly there are two competing narratives out there. And we, at the moment, yes, it seems that Mr. Trump's narrative is losing out. But again, it's, till the last vote is counted, we really don't know.
Absolutely.
And if you have the last minute surge by the Republican supporters, by Mr. Trump supporters, then the things will be looking very, very different on the election day. So again, the numbers don't really tell us much at the moment. yes, there is record number of early voters that have already polled, but there is also an expectation that record numbers are going to turn out on the election day. So I think it's going to be very, very interesting come November the 3rd.
Indeed. Ambassador Srivastav, you've been a keen follower of US politics. Now, I want you to look ahead, so to speak. Forget about the 3rd November election for now. Looking ahead at a Trump 2.0 versus a Biden in the White House, how do you think that will pan out for issues such as India, China, the Indo-Pacific, Iran, and other conflict, hotspots around the world?
Well, Trump's position is very well known. If he wins, for example.
So how would you compare the two? Trump 2.0 versus Biden, a SWOT analysis, so to speak?
Yeah. Trump, I'll take the issues one by one. For example, on issues like, most important issue, I think, is China. And Indo-Pacific is connected to that issue. And Trump is going to go very strongly against China. He, in his campaign speeches, he has been saying China virus. He has been, sharply condemning the Chinese. And during his first presidency, his first term, he took a lot of strong actions against China. Biden will probably not be as strong against China as Trump has been. So we can expect some amount of, a softening of the U.S. position on China. Now, but if you look at, if you look at India, for example. On India, Trump has been very strongly with India vis-a-vis China. Now, Biden also will be with India, there is no doubt about it, vis-a-vis China, but again, his position will be softer. So you can expect a bit of softening of this of position on issues like China, Indo-Pacific, relations with India, and so on and so forth. But Iran, there will be a clear change, in my view, because Trump has gone out of his way to abrogate the,
Iran nuclear deal.
This Iran nuclear deal. I think that will be reversed.
I see.
And that will be a very major. Development for, for the situation in the Middle East. But this is the only major. These are the major differences that I see between.
So I get a fair idea of what you're trying to say here, Ambassador. But if I can also bring in Professor Pant. Professor Pant, if I can just cite what Trump said not so long ago. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, if Biden wins, China wins. Now, looking at it from India's perspective, how do you think India will fare in their scheme of things, a Trump 2.0 versus Biden in the White House? Can we expect change with continuity, bipartisan support going forward as well?
As far as India is concerned, we have seen over the last few, in fact, decades, despite different administrations, a big bipartisan consensus on the importance of India, on the larger structural changes in the Indo-Pacific, and the position that America should be taking in the region. So it has evolved. Certainly under Mr. Trump, it has gotten a lot more clearer. Mr. Trump is very categorical in his assertions about the structural changes in the region, the rise of China, its consequences, etc. And I don't expect that to change very, very radically under Mr. Biden. If you look at his campaign speeches on the strategic matters, he's actually trying to take a position which is not very different from Mr. Trump. The change would be nuanced. Perhaps he will try to moderate some of the trade issues with China.
I see.
But on the strategic competition aspect, I think there is a wider consensus now in the American body politic, in the American bureaucracy, in the American intelligentsia, that China's rise has to be challenged now. Because if it is not done now, then it is too late. So clearly, I think Mr. Biden will also come with a lot of, anti-China sentiment pervading the system. But I think where his problems will lie is how does he resolve intra-democratic party tensions?
Right.
Because Mr. Biden today is leading a coalition of Democrats, which including him, centrist Democrats. There are conservative Democrats. There are, progressive left who call themselves as progressive left.
Right.
And they don't see eye to eye on many issues. And I think for him, the biggest challenge would be, how do you bring a consensus within his own party on how to manage the world and the global order? Because a lot of these people, for example, on the left, progressive left, would want stronger statements, stronger policies on climate change, human rights, labor rights, etc. And a lot of the centrists, a lot of the conservative elements in the Democratic Party would want a more robust posture and continuation of the China policy, for example, or a more robust security arrangement in the Indo-Pacific. So how does he bring them together will be a big test of his leadership. And that will be a challenge for India. How does it navigate that initial few years or initial few months in a Biden presidency, in a Biden administration? Because they're always challenging when an administration changes, when a new government comes in.
Point well taken. Ambassador Srivastav, let's talk a bit, if you will, about the Indian-American community. Now, Kamala Harris is one person who could well create history come 3rd November. She could possibly become the first person of color to become the Vice President of the US. Now, in that context, looking at her rise to, fame, so to speak, has the Indian-American community in particular come of age? Have they become a force reckoned with in US domestic politics as a power of consequence, so to speak?
If you look at them in population terms, they constitute just around 1% of the US population. So their numbers may not be very high.
Right.
But the crucial thing to note is that in many of the battleground states, they have an important presence, and their votes can swing the result one way or the other. So they are important in this sense in the battleground states. Despite their low numbers, they are important, and therefore they are being wooed both by Trump and by Biden and Kamala Harris. Now, sure, Kamala Harris's Indian ancestry will have a role to play. But in any case, the almost say 70 to 75% of the Indian American community has traditionally voted Democratic. And that might get a bit reinforced by Kamala Harris, that she is there. On the other hand, Trump has done a great deal for Indo-US relations. So we cannot also, brush aside his track record in that sense. But I think the Indian American community will play their votes will be important in this. I think the majority of their votes will go for Biden and Kamala Harris. And I think that Kamala Harris's, Indian ancestry will play some role. I'm not saying a crucial role or anything like that. Will play some role because we must also remember that she has projected her image as an African American,
right,
not as an Indian American person.
Why is it so? What do you make of her choice, so to speak, to project her, as you call it, African American ancestry or heritage as compared to her South Asian origin?
It's very, very simple. The percentage of African American voters is around 13% or so. Compare that to around 1% of Indian Americans.
I see.
So, the gap is far too wide, and she's right in focusing on them. But at the same time, I think that she is taking the Indian American voters seriously. Okay. I think the Biden campaign is taking them seriously. Initially, they played some catch up with the Trump campaign because Trump has his track record, including, you see, just a few days ago, the signing of the the BICA agreement. So, and standing with India firmly and taking strong steps against China. So, so we look at it, Kamala Harris, I would say, she definitely is an asset to the Biden team.
Okay.
No doubt about it.
Right.
But she will not swing it one way or the other. I mean,
All
to
right,
call
point
that,
taken.
yeah.
Professor Pant, now I want you to look back at the 4 years of Trump administration. How would you rate his foreign policy legacy, so to speak? For instance, his policy or stand vis-a-vis Afghanistan, vis-a-vis Iran, North Korea, and also West Asia, which is our extended neighborhood. So how would you rate his foreign policy credentials, so to speak, in the last 4 odd years?
I think like other presidents we have seen, there is a lot of, it's a mixed bag. And in some ways, because, this idea of Mr. Trump as a great disruptor has been so, widely upheld or widely held that we often don't see a relatively more nuanced picture that he has presented. I think clearly he has been most disruptive on the question of multilateralism. His dislike for multilateral institutions, his withdrawal from various multilateral forums, that has really been very challenging for the global order, because multilateral order has really been the fulcrum around which a lot of the discussions, a lot of the global order has revolved for the last few decades. So for America to retreat in that sense opens up an entire space for countries like China to fill in. But on the other hand, if you see how robust he has been on the question of Indo-Pacific, on challenging China, and challenging long-standing assumptions about China policy in America and the West, that perhaps will be his lasting legacy. Because what he has done is completely transformed the China landscape. Go back 4 years, there was still, the policy consensus was that the West and America in particular should keep on engaging China. That it should keep on working with China to resolve certain problems, to work bilaterally, etc., etc. Coming to office, he turned it on its head by not only challenging China on strategic matters, but also on economic matters, where China has benefited a lot by being non-reciprocal in many ways, with several countries, including America and including India. So he has challenged those assumptions and forced the world to look at China in a very different way compared to what it was the case when he was before him. So there is that larger challenge for India, for Mr. Trump, for his foreign policy. When you try to look at it from that perspective, that he has been very invigorating in some ways, and he has also again changed a lot in the multilateral framework. But clearly, a lot of the questions that he had raised, maybe he had raised them in a very crude manner. For example, sharing of burden by other countries, etc. But these questions have been long-standing now in American politics. You can go back to George W. Bush, Barack Obama. Both of them were talking of American retreat in some ways, and both of them were talking of burden sharing. Both of them were talking of how American alliances should be doing more, alliance partners should be doing more. So in that sense, there is a lot of continuity in his approach. And once you look back at his 4 years, you realize in a lot of areas, he has broken new ground, like in the Middle East, for example, like this idea that America needs to get out of wars, both in Iraq and in Afghanistan, again, a legacy of Obama administration. But in some areas, he has broken new ground, like China, like Indo-Pacific, and also the larger global economic order, where I think that the issue of economic decoupling is now broadly taken to be very normal. But remember, before Mr. Trump, there was no talk of economic decoupling. In fact, we were led to believe that the only way the world can go ahead is by engaging and continuing to engage economically with China. So clearly he has broken new ground.
So he has broken new ground, says Professor Pant. We have a fascinating conversation going on here, but I'm afraid I have completely run out of time, Professor Pant. I'll have to stop you there. I hope you won't take it otherwise, but we need to end this conversation here. I want to thank both my guests, Professor Pant and Ambassador Srivastava, for joining us on Newsnight. Appreciate it. Thank you. Right, and you can catch all the latest on the US election as it happens on DD India. Stay tuned to your channel for a comprehensive coverage of the US election, complete with experts from India and the US, and a team of reporters on the ground covering coast to coast and everything in between. Don't forget to tune in at 6 p.m. on 3rd November. Joe Biden goes head-to-head against Donald Trump. What is at stake in the US election? And why is it important for India and the world? Join us for a 14-hour live coverage of the race for the White House from 6 p.m. on November 3, only on DD India, A Billion Voices. Right, so don't forget to tune in at 6 p.m. on 3rd November, only on DD India. All right, take a look at what else is making news around India in our National Roundup segment.
In the ongoing Kharif marketing season 2020-2021, government continues to procure Kharif 2020-21 crops at its MSP from farmers as per its existing MSP schemes, as was done in previous seasons. Further, based on the proposal from the states, approval was accorded for procurement of 45.10 LMT of pulse and oilseeds of Kharif marketing season for the states of Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Maharashtra, Telangana, Gujarat, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, Odisha, Rajasthan and Andhra Pradesh under price support scheme. Freight figures of Indian Railways continue to maintain high momentum in terms of earnings and loading in the month of October 2020. On mission mode, Indian Railways freight loading last month crossed last year's loading and earnings for the same period. In October 2020, Railways loading was 108.16 million tons, which is 15% higher compared to last year's loading for the same period, which was 93.75 million tons. In this period, Railways earned 10,405.12 crores from freight loading, which is 9% higher compared to last year's earnings for the same period. Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath launched a campaign for tuberculosis vaccination in Lucknow on Sunday. CM also launched a campaign for the search of active TB patients and golden card distribution among them. A population of over 81 lakh will be covered in this aggressive survey to be rolled out in 29 low-performing districts. CM has appealed to the people of the state to come forward and get themselves tested on the slightest doubt. Karnataka celebrated Kannada Rajyotsava on Sunday. It was on this day in 1956 when all Kannada-speaking regions of South India were merged to form the state of Karnataka. Chief Minister B.S. Yediyurappa participated at the state celebration at Kantirva Stadium. Celebration was simple owing to COVID restrictions and social distancing was visible. Chief Minister offered flowers and paid respects to goddess Chamundeshwari and hoisted the national flag. Authorities of Kaziranga National Park and Tiger Reserve in Assam have restarted the elephant safari from Sunday. The park officials allowed booking for only 37 seats in view of COVID-19 infection and received 100% booking. The world-famous national park, which was closed for tourists in March this year in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic.
All right, now take a look at all the news related to COVID-19 pandemic in our COVID Wrap segment.
India continues to report a trend of steadily declining active cases. For the third consecutive day, the active caseload in the country is below the 6 lakh mark. Presently, India's total active caseload is 5,70,458, which is only 6.97% of the total positive cases. India also continues to have one of the lowest cases per million globally. The country's average cases per million stand at 5,930. India's deaths per million population is also one of the lowest in the world and stand at 88. In US, this figure is 686, while Brazil has recorded 748 deaths per million. Total samples tested for coronavirus infection up to 31st October across India has crossed the mark of 10.98 crores. More than 10.91 lakh samples were tested on 31st October. Tamil Nadu Agriculture Minister R. Duraikannu passed away due to corona-related infection at a hospital in Chennai late on Saturday night. He was 72 years old and had been receiving treatment for the past 17 days. His condition worsened a couple of days ago and his lungs suffered extensive damage. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has expressed sorrow over the demise of Duraikannu. In Tamil Nadu, prohibitory orders under Section 144 banning assembly of more than 5 persons in public places in the wake of coronavirus pandemic has been extended in Greater Chennai police limits up to November 30th. Union Home Secretary Ajay Kumar Bhalla will review on Monday the coronavirus situation in Delhi, which has seen a sudden spike in cases. Top officials of the Union Health Ministry and the Delhi government will attend the meeting.
All right, in world news, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has announced that England will go back into a national lockdown after the United Kingdom passed the milestone of 1 million COVID-19 cases and a second wave of infections threatened to overwhelm the health service. Johnson said the one-month lockdown across England will kick in at a minute past midnight on the 5th of November morning and last until the 2nd of December. Australia's health minister has said that the country is on track to have internal borders by Christmas. Australia recorded no new daily coronavirus community infections today for the first time in nearly 5 months, paving the way for further easing of social distancing restrictions. The state of Victoria, which accounts for more than 90% of Australia's COVID deaths, saw 0 new daily infections and no deaths for the second consecutive day. Israel began human trials on Sunday for its COVID-19 vaccine candidate, which, if successful, could be ready for the general public by the end of next summer. 80 volunteers will initially take part in the trial that will expand to 960 people in December. Should those trials succeed, a third stage with 30,000 volunteers is scheduled for April and May. Now, the Israel Institute for Biological Research, which is overseen by the Defense Ministry, began animal trials for its BriLife vaccine in March and announced a week ago that it had received regulatory approval to take it to the next stage. Rescuers continue to dig through the ruins of flattened buildings on Sunday as the death toll from Friday's quake off the Turkish coast rose to 60 and the hope of finding survivors in the rubble faded. Earlier, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan announced 58 deaths, while 2 teenagers died on the Greek island of Samos. Officials said 20 buildings were destroyed in Izmir's Berakli district, which was in the process of urban transformation due to lack of earthquake resistance. And finally, coming back to India, Minister of State for Education Sanjay Dhotare on Sunday launched a self-help website developed by IIT Bombay and its alumni to enhance emotional well-being of students. The website is supported by the alumni of the class of 1992.
In order to ease pressure from students' mind, IIT Bombay launched a self-help website to enhance the emotional well-being of its students. Minister of State for Education Sanjay Dhotare launched a self-help website Bandhu for students of IIT Bombay. The website is supported by the alumni of class of 1992. Eminent filmmaker Nitesh Tiwari, who is also an IIT Bombay alumni, was the guest of honor. Speaking on this occasion, the minister said that Bandhu initiative will help our students to travel on their respective chosen paths in a stress-free manner, ensuring the emotional well-being. He further said that National Education Policy 2020 says that in every educational institution there shall be counseling systems for handling stress and emotional adjustments. The website Bandhu has been designed in conjunction with the counselors at IIT Bombay along with external experts with support from Professor T. Kundu and Professor Suhas Joshi. It addresses challenges ranging from adjustment to college life, academic stress and mental health. Bandhu has curated reads, motivational alumni journeys, expert podcasts and tools for self-exploration. While addressing the launch, Nitesh Tiwari said that there is a lot of pressure on students' mind, but everyone has to find a way to cope up with it. He said, instead of thinking about results, students should give their best because there are brilliant minds in IIT classroom. Project Bandhu was initiated by alumni of the class of 1992 as a part of their Silver Jubilee reunion in 2017. They pledged to support IIT Bombay and help students enhance their emotional well-being. The self-help website is one of the first steps in this direction. Shishish Chellar's report, DD News, Mumbai.
And that's a wrap. Our news continues here on DD India. You can catch all the latest updates on our social media, mobile and digital platforms. Do tune in at 6 p.m. on 3rd November for the Race for the White House, our exclusive coverage of the US elections only on DD India. Don't forget, it's a simple task. Just wear a mask. Join DD India's Mask Up campaign to beat COVID-19. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
प्राचीनतम भूमि बिहार